Today we are going to dedicate our show to the Dorothy Day Catholic worker community in Duluth, Minnesota.
Right.
And we're going to tell you a little bit about that. Our son Michael joined the community last September, and he is a volunteer. He lives at the Dorothy Day House, one of 3 houses in the community. And because I'm kind of losing my voice, Gary's going to tell you a little bit more about
pick up where you left off there. And
about the whole thing.
There's 3 different homes that are in the Duluth area. They're all within a few blocks of each other. And the Dorothy Day House is a men's home for homeless people that need help. And there's 3 residents, Michael being one of them, resident managers, if you want to call them that. And then there's 12 residents. Up to 12 people can stay at the house for a length of time, that whatever they need to get back on their feet. Then there's also another home down the street a few blocks for women, and that is called the Olive Branch. Kind of the same situation there. It's for women in need of help, young mothers as well, and then there's a third house which is just getting going, and that's called the Hannah House, and that is for people who are more on their feet but need help, just getting back out into the world again, and they're going to start a daycare.
Right, but the Hannah House is actually now going to be for foster care.
For foster care. You're right. It's kind of converting to a foster care.
Yeah,
right.
And the young woman Brooke, who works at the Hannah House, is licensed to actually have 2 foster
children
at
the same time. Right.
So it's just a really amazing community, and the reason why we're doing this show, kind of dedicating it, is we went to Duluth for the weekend. And before we went, Michael said it was going to be Donna's birthday, and they were going to have a party for Donna.
And Donna's one of the helpers, one of the volunteers.
Right.
And she's been around helping in this organization for how many years? Did
well,
she
like
say?
20-some years.
27 years, I think it was, off and on.
So when we arrived, we took a whole bunch of food there, and the volunteers that work at the house are actually responsible for helping make all of the meals. And they have open hours Monday through Saturday from 9 to 6, and on their website, which will give you their web address, you can actually just come in for dinner. So they really never know how many people they might have, and dinner's always served at 6 p.m. So
they can have anywhere from 5 or 6 people sitting at the dining table
people.
Up to 15 or 20.
Right.
So the person who's in charge of making a meal is always surprised.
Yeah.
Not always surprised, but somewhat surprised. At some meals, it's like, oh my gosh, there's more people here than we thought. But
so
we made the name Loaves and Fishes, and that's
so helping to feed the homeless and people in need.
Right.
So we took a birthday cake along, for Donna, and then we were surprised to find out that we were going to help make scones, blueberry scones being her favorite scone.
She loves blueberries.
Yeah, and blueberries are really Gary's less favorite scone to make because they can get kind of mushy.
The blueberries get kind of mushy as you put it together, and I'll show you a little trick that I just kind of put together. Probably other people have made scones, do this all the time. For me, it was my first time doing it this way to try to keep the blueberries from getting all mushed up and smashed within the dough. So.
Yeah, so we're going to make blueberry scones. So kind of in honor of Donna's birthday, July 3rd, we're doing a repeat of blueberry scones.
Right. So you're going to get the
we have found that using
going.
the food processor is the easiest way. And we're going to start with 2 cups of flour. And it's already pre-sifted flour, so you don't have to re-sift it.
And I can hear your voice is starting to tail off here, so I can continue talking for you if you want me to. And then you do a 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. Just mix that in there, and then there's a teaspoon of baking powder.
And Gary knows that I don't always like to get my hands all dirty and everything, so he especially enjoys
doing this
stuff, yeah.
Although you are the pie crust maker, and you don't mind doing that.
Okay, 1/4 teaspoon.
1/4 teaspoon of
baking soda.
Baking soda, and then a little.
And it calls for about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and we put in about a 1/4 teaspoon.
We do about a 1/4.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm going to just going to quickly pulse the dry ingredients together. It doesn't say that in the directions, but I like to just mix it up quickly.
And,
Okay.
and when you first made scones, we, kind of researched them a bit and found out that if you use frozen butter, especially using the food processor, it helps the consistency of
Right.
your of the scones. So 1 stick of frozen butter, so that's a half a cup of butter.
You can just chop it up into small pieces. Your food processor is going to
And this is
cut into
actually
this very
organic
easily.
butter that we have had on hand
time
that
to
we were
use it
going
up.
to make some other things. So we decided that we would just use organic butter.
You just throw their pieces of butter in the flour mixture. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to again run it probably about 30 seconds. I'm going to pulse it a couple times. And I'm going to run it, like I said, 20 or 30 seconds, just so you can hear that all the butter pieces are now mixed in. Kind of quiets down a little bit like that.
And it can be either, like not necessarily a pebble,
Yeah. It's
substance, but
Yeah,
just
it's still
all,
a nice
so that
powdery.
it's just
You can see it's a little granulated.
all
there, not
mixed
too
in.
bad.
Okay, and then we are going to add 1 egg to a half a cup of sour cream.
Turn the oven
We're
on.
gonna just beat that in. Beat that in.
That's good.
Okay, and then I'll give you, to grab that, and I'll give you a scraper.
Okay. And we'll just pour it around a little bit like so. Nothing magical. Just like I mixed in the butter, I'm going to run this about 20 or 30 seconds until you see it becoming a pasty mixture. And that's about as far as you want to go. That's perfect.
And we're gonna put a lot of flour here. I'll let you just spread that
I'm gonna
out.
spread this out.
So you want enough flour so that your pastry isn't going to stick to your board.
Right.
And you can use a pastry sheet or, whatever kind of board. Let me get this out of your way now.
Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into 2 pieces. Try to keep it all on the board and not on the floor. 2 even dough balls, like so. And this was my new discovery that I told you earlier about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten out both pieces. And the trick to making scones is to not overwork the dough, because you put in frozen butter, and that's to help keep it more solidified. So what I'm doing is I'm going to flatten out both pieces to about maybe a ½ an inch thick. Okay.
And you can make them thinner if you want.
If
It
you
all
want.
depends how thick you want your scone to turn out.
Right. Okay. Now my new way of doing this, and I only do this with fresh berries. When you're doing blueberries, for example, I'm going to lay them in 1/2, and then I'm going to cover it with the other half that I flattened out. And the reason for that is if I just worked in these fresh blueberries into each of the dough balls and tried to roll them up, they get really mushy and the juice starts...
And they just all break apart.
They all break apart and the juice starts running out, and then the dough gets very difficult to work with. So hence, I am putting in the berries on one side. We're going to show you how you just simply cover
And
it
Donna
up.
loves blueberries, so she said she didn't care if they were mushed out or
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah.
As long as she had
Her-
lots of blueberries in her scones.
Her theory was you can never have too many blueberries. So there is 1/2. I'm going to lay this other cover over it. I'm just going to kind of pinch the sides down. Okay, now I'm going to cut this in half. And this is where it gets a little messy. You got to pick this up now. Try to keep the berries intact, and they're gonna roll out on you. Don't worry about it. They're gonna come out on all sides, but this is better than trying to, like I said earlier, trying to mush them all inside the dough, into the dough ball. So now, and again, you're going to have some that are going to sneak out on you. Don't worry about it, because when we get done flattening this, some are going to come to the top. And you want to, when your final product comes about, you're going to want some blueberries showing through anyway.
One time when you were
Maybe a
making,
little more flour,
yep,
if you could.
I think you had blueberries
That's good.
or craisins, one or the other. You decided that you thought it would be easier to just put your craisins on top,
Oh yeah,
which didn't work real well.
doesn't work real well,
because
then
then
the
after you
craisins
baked
will-
them, then
they'll
all
burn. They'll
just-
burn and dry out.
and fell off too.
right. See, the other way of making, now this is for the fresh fruit scones that we're making today. If you were doing craisins, for example, those are easy. Then you can roll the craisins, the dry craisins, right into the dough ball that I had earlier. Mix them all up easily because they don't mush. They don't get all messy. Now when you're forming the circle of dough, try to square up the edges like that. Okay. And again, I'm trying to put a little flour on my fingers because I'm working this gently and not too much, because the more you work it, the pastier and more thawed out the dough is going to be. Okay,
That
like
looks
that.
good.
That looks good. Okay, now you just take a pizza cutter. You can cut them any size you want. Something like this, we like to cut them into about 8 pieces. Cut them larger or smaller.
And now
if
the
you want to.
recipe that we use actually says to cut them in 8 pieces. But as you can see, if you cut them into only 8 pieces, you'd have
mean
4
8 total pieces?
8 total pieces.
Oh, yeah.
So you would have
You'd have
huge scones.
giant
And maybe you
scones.
want huge scones.
Yeah.
But then if you're going to, serve this at a brunch or something, it's kind of nice to have something not quite so large. And then it complements your egg bakes and
Right.
fruit like we had on Sunday for Donna's birthday, and it just
Right.
makes something nice. And if you do a variety of scones, and if they're a little bit smaller, in fact, we even made some that were quartered
Smaller than that.
again,
Cut 'em again.
so people
Okay, then-
can enjoy a couple
Right.
different ones.
And what I'm doing now is I'm laying them so any fashion you want, but keep them about a 1/2 inch to an inch apart because they will expand somewhat in the oven. Okay, now Ruth is going to put a little
Little bit of
granulated
sugar.
sugar on it. She prefers to use the spoon method. For me, it gets a little bit too much on there. I prefer to just take my fingers and sprinkle a little on there, but you can do it either way.
Michael had some issues with his bike when he was living in Madison, and he had a friend who was constantly trying to fix the chain or whatever was breaking on it. So what's interesting, which we discovered visiting where Michael's house is, the Dorothy Day House, is that they have what's called a bike cave, which they bring in old bikes that people donate. Okay, we're going to put that in the oven. Convection oven 375, bake for 8 minutes. Electric oven 400, and bake 15 to 17 minutes. And you want to bake them until they're just nicely browned in the bottom, kind of lightly browned on top. So anyway, so at their bike
So the
cave,
bike cave, yeah,
that's
it's
one
a-
of the things that they have. They kind of, well, they'll ask for volunteers if you have other people that could actually come in to help them that know how to fix bikes and things.
They have hundreds of bikes
Yeah.
all lined up in the basement in their workshop. They have a storage shed behind their house full of bikes, and then they have a whole bunch of bikes lined up on a bike rack in the back of the house to be repaired or ready to go. So it's kind of neat. It's a great cause, and just helping out the people who are less fortunate and in need of some help getting back on their feet. And they are sizzling hot.
Okay, so Gary's scones are coming out of the oven. And having the extra sugar, I think, makes them look extra nice, don't you think?
It does give them a nice little
Yeah.
added touch. And you just simply, and we didn't tell you earlier in the show, but you do is just lightly grease this pan before you put your scones on. A little Crisco. Okay? Comes off very easily, as you can see. Just put them on a cooling rack. Let them cool for a little while.
And as you can see, the blueberries are
Yep.
oozing out a little bit.
And that's okay.
If I can just add one more thing, Michael told us all about going to the Capitol in St. Paul, where they had a legislation day
Well, met with some assemblymen.
one day, and they were
assembly people.
actually able to talk about, you know, the homeless population, which is really serious, and the needs that are out there. So they felt good, you know, coming
Yeah, that they were-
back from that.
That they had some ears that listened, and we'll see what happens in the Minnesota State Legislature.
So now, right around the corner, of course, is not only Donna's birthday, July 3rd, so happy birthday, Donna. Wishing you lots of wonderful years ahead. And 4th of July, of course, is the next day, so we're going to have some of our kids are going to be home and having some picnics and enjoying some blueberry scones. You can also freeze these, so we'll be freezing them. They freeze really well.
Right.
And
We'll probably make some pretzels too,
some German pretzels.
like we did a year ago. We did some on the show, so we're going to make some of those.
So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Cooking with Ruth, and from Gary and me, happy 4th of July, and until next time, happy cooking.
This is not outtake, this is what you call intake.
Intake. I would, but then I'd probably start choking or something.
This is excellent. They're excellent, even if I did make them.